Alan Ryder, Southeastern Railway Museum, and I thought I'd do a follow-up video about our switch engine SRM 8202. About a month or so ago, we did a video about the problem we had with low oil pressure on the locomotive, and that video is on our YouTube channel. Hopefully there'll be a link to it in the description, but if not, you can just search our YouTube channel. It's pretty simple. 8202 low oil, and there's a picture of the low oil button lit up. But anyway, number of questions or comments came up, which I thought I would address. I'm not always the greatest at reading the comments, but there are a few that could deserve some answers. So without further ado, we'll do a little bit of tidy up in the cab and then move on to answering some questions. Well, I'm in the process of cleaning up this gauge panel, and turns out some of these gauges don't need to be here and other ones aren't what they say they are. This gauge here is engine water temperature, and it's a capillary tube type gauge, and the capillary tube is broken off, so the gauge doesn't do anything. So that's going to come off, or actually I think we're going to cover it up. This gauge marked Alco. V12 Productions noticed that when he was doing a video about this locomotive, and it didn't work because the pointer was broken off. This gauge is labeled piston cooling, but it's not. Turns out that's fuel pressure. So that's one of the problems when you have gauges that are labeled and they get moved to other places. This one over here is main lube oil pump pressure. It's that gauge works and it is accurate. This one over here, this Alco gauge, I got it recalibrated and fixed up. It is piston cooling oil pressure. So this gauge is good, this gauge is good, this gauge is good. This gauge here is air pressure for what? I'm not really certain. It was added. It doesn't work. It's hooked up. The gauge probably works, but whatever it's been hooked to has likely been disconnected. We did some simplifying of the air brake system, so this may not do anything. This probably doesn't do anything, so it's coming out. And once we do that, we'll blank off these openings, make it look all pretty. Okay, gauge is gone. Since I really didn't want to go crawling around underneath the cab floor to track down where that tubing is connected, I went ahead and put a flare plug on the end of it, just in case there's air at some condition, which I doubt. And I was also even kind enough to put a tie wrap on the end of the tubing so it won't rattle. I believe the operating folks will appreciate that. For that bad temperature gauge, I just simply painted the gauge glass gray and put it back on. That seemed to be the easiest course of action. There are blanks made for the empty spaces. Made them out of an old ceiling fan blade. There now. Everything back together and looking good, and the gauges are labeled so we know which one does what. And while we're at it, took care of the air brake gauges as well. When our volunteers painted the cab, they had to peel all the labels off of what the different gauges and switches and stuff do. So while I was taking care of that, I went ahead and made new labels for these switches here, and then there's a few on the other side. Nothing significant. One there and one there for the roof beacon and the engine room lights. A couple of comments were made about these test gauges on the engine. This one and then that one down there, and that they're kind of hung in a precarious position, and that is true. But these are actually just test gauges, and those have quick connects, and with that heavy gauge is off, and I'll take the other one off in just a minute. Just for information, that quick connect fitting is an ISO I think they call it a 7241. It's a hydraulic fitting, and that is the same fitting that EMD uses on newer locomotives for test points. Got them on the fuel pump, they got them on a lot of the oil piping. So if you ever need any for your locomotive, they're very readily available. Those I got from Amazon, and make a handy thing when you need to add a test point. Several people commented about why anybody in their right mind would paint the inside of the engine with paint. And this is almost certainly glyptal paint. It's used generally for electrical insulation. But in the world of engine builders, like hot rods and performance engines, it's a fairly common practice. And the guy who painted this was a car guy, so he thought he was doing a good thing. And it would be fine. The difference is when they do this on engines that car people or industrial people build engines, first thing they do is to thoroughly clean the block, and that often means steaming it, boiling it out, get all the oil residue and such out of it. And you really can't do that on an engine, certainly not a locomotive engine in place. You can do it if you pull the engine out. They're big vats that rebuilders use to do that very thing. But not us. So most places the paint stuck just fine, but not all of them. And that's where our problem came in with oil getting in the filters and strainers. And I'll pick around with this. I don't think you can see some of the spots where, I think like right there. There are places here and there where where the paint's peeled off. And you know, it comes off in little bitty flakes. You can kind of see it right there. And it's not a good thing, but what we'll ultimately do is we're going to change the filters. Probably come springtime, we take this engine out of hibernation. We're not likely to run it a whole lot since it's fall, and we'll drain it and shut it down for the winter. So that's the explanation of how the top deck on this engine got painted. Sidebar, that's the top deck cover that I just took off. And railroaders have good nicknames for stuff, and these things are called coffin lids because they really kind of look like a coffin lid. There's some more of them. I've got that one pushed aside. You have to lift the middle one up to get the end one out. So that's what they look like when they're back in place. One of the questions that came up in the comments was how come I didn't show videos of the oil coming up through these sight glasses. And in fact, I did try that, and I didn't really have much luck on getting good video of it. So I've come up with an alternate idea which may work. So we'll step out here. You'll recall this is the screen where the oil comes out of the cylinders, goes through the cylinders, up through the top, rolls into the bottom of this reservoir here. And you can actually look through that screen and see the filters, or the cylinders where the filters are. So I've got a camera there, and I've got my whatever you call it, the endoscope, fluoroscope here, and we're going to set that up and start the locomotive, and hopefully you'll be able to see the oil when it starts to flow and roll across the outside of the cylinders and down. So we're going to give that a try. No guarantees it'll work, but we'll see. So I'm going to try to get a shot of the oil coming up where you can see it in the sight glass. So we shall see if that works. And you can see this poor little camera got half drowned it in oil when the filter tank filled up, but it still works. So, well, that about wraps things up. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, if you're in the Atlanta area, come see us. And if you enjoy the channel and the videos, please like and subscribe and all that other good stuff that all the YouTube content generators say. So again, thanks a lot and enjoy.